Hey, what's party? Welcome back to News Dose, and we live in a very interesting time right now. A little background from me. I've been around since 1991, and I've been lucky enough to own most consoles in between that time. Now, I didn't grow up with a lot of money, far from it in all honesty, but my mother has always been wonderful, and she just knew that love of gaming that I had, and she did what she could. One of the reasons that gaming was accessible for somebody like our family, though, came down to price reduction. Over time, consoles and games would, it seems alien now, but they used to become more affordable over time. So when I think about my past and how I grew up, and then when I think about the current landscape for gaming, it's something that resonates with me. We're now in this almost, it feels like an upside down world, which apparently includes raising the price of consoles and games throughout a single generation. Now, technically, we can say that the Switch 2 is a brand new console. It's in a slightly different situation, but we can't really say the same thing about Xbox and PlayStation, both of which have raised the price of their consoles this generation multiple times, actually. And that's even well before the whole tariff situation came along. Now, that still remains extremely fluid. We still need to see how that works itself out, but there has been a temporary breakthrough. And this kind of puts Nintendo and Xbox specifically in a very, I'd say, interesting situation. Now, all of a sudden, there's this very real question that consumers have. Will Xbox and Nintendo suddenly drop the price with this new information? And as sad as this might be to say, I'm not necessarily too convinced of that just yet. And yeah, we're going to get into some of that today. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do. You all are genuinely awesome, and I truly do mean that. I know I thank you all every single day with a similar statement, but I really do mean it every single time. I truly cannot thank you all enough. Let's go get right into things, though, starting off with a Switch 2 update. For anybody who still wants the Switch 2 and so far has been unable to secure a pre-order, I come bearing some good news today. We had already heard some rumors about Target and Walmart having some on-hand supply for the June 5th launch, but today, we actually got a confirmation from Best Buy that they absolutely will have some units in stock. Now, this will be a limited supply, and that is the key word here, limited. But you can read their exact statement here. They said on June 5th, most stores will have limited inventory of systems, games, accessories, and a chance to receive a Nintendo collectible. So, with that word in mind, limited, that part is important because you're going to want to be at your local Best Buy as soon as they open the door. In fact, I would actually expect a line outside of their door ahead of its opening. So if you want to go in this direction to get your Switch 2, you're probably going to want to be there at least an hour early, if not even really before that. Obviously, we don't know which stores will have stock, and we also don't know how limited the supply actually is. So all I can really kind of say here is to just prepare yourself and be there well ahead of time. That way you can have a better shot to beat the odds. After that, it really just all kind of comes down to luck if your store is one of the lucky ones to have supply. Now, maybe you can call your local Best Buy a day or two ahead of time. Just kind of call in and see if they know about their stock situation. That would probably be the best way to not waste your time. Again, if the employees actually have that knowledge on hand. Either which way, though, best of luck to anybody who's still trying to secure a Switch 2. Now, we also got an update for Fallout Season 2 on Amazon. Now, in my opinion, Season 1 was one of the better game-to-film adaptations ever made. Personally, I think it's 10 times better than The Last of Us, which, even back in 2023, I was very critical of Season 1. I thought it was extremely overrated outside of Episode 1. Good start, but each episode after that progressively got worse, in my opinion. Just play the game. It's so much better. Fallout, though, is a standalone new story for the Fallout universe, and it's extremely well acted and very entertaining. So it had a huge amount of success, and that reflected on the games in a big way. The games took off to new heights, just incredible new heights. And I think the only mistake that Microsoft and Bethesda made with its release is that they didn't have a new game prepared for its launch. I can only imagine what a game like that would have done. But here's the good news, because it sounds like the Fallout Amazon series is going to be around for a long time coming, and hopefully they can continue that high quality. They just announced that Season 2 will premiere this December, and they've already renewed it for Season 3. That means that they now have a pipeline prepared, and they're not just going to wait around to make Season 3. That's actually one of the reasons that modern-day shows take such a long time between each individual season. Companies like Netflix, they don't renew their shows until months or even longer after the release of a season. And I'll tell you this right now, there's zero reason that it should take 3+ years to make a new season of a show, when you have all-time greats like Game of Thrones, which had a far more impressive production and still had a new season out every single year. It's actually ridiculous how much some of these modern-day companies have lowered our expectations, and I'll just simply leave it at that. Nonetheless, here, though, more Fallout goodness is on the way, and eventually they could actually pair one of these new seasons with the leaked Fallout 3 remaster, which will evidently be massive. Now, we also got an interesting story for anybody who likes the Tony Hawk series. Of course, we have the 3+4 remakes inbound, but apparently that hasn't stopped fans from looking onward. Requests for more remakes have already made their way to Tony Hawk himself. In an interview with Screen Rant, they asked him about more remakes beyond 3+4, in which he responded, "I always have aspirations. It's not up to me generally. I'll campaign all I can, but I'm working with a much bigger company that's a lot smarter than me." He was then asked if Activision had brought it up with him if these remakes do good, and all he said was that, yeah, we haven't even released this game. And I think that's really the best response that he could have possibly made, because there was a lot of uncertainty that this would ever happen given Activision's just laser focus on the Call of Duty series. But you know what? It's finally happening, and let's just kind of see how it turns out. If it's good and if it sells well, then we can kind of look onward. And I will say, it would be cool to eventually get some of these underground games. I know they're fan favorites among some fans because they do have a different tone to them. But yeah, let's just kind of take it one day at a time and then just kind of go from there. If anything else, it sounds like Tony Hawk would be on board. But for right now, it seems like their focus is on 3+4, as it should be. All right, now let's go and move on to the big story of the day. And yeah, okay, I can already see the comments incoming. Some people do have, we'll just say, very strong emotional reactions to this type of topic because it does deal with tariffs. And for better or worse, there is a political element to this conversation. Now, I don't enjoy talking about politics on the channel. It does zero, and I mean absolutely zero favors for me, because no matter what I say, I will be the enemy to somebody. That's just kind of the reality of today's world and today's mentality. If you don't agree with me, then you're my enemy. That's the way a lot of people think. So I think this topic has kind of put gaming YouTubers in a bit of a weird situation, because gaming and politics have somewhat intertwined because tariffs have impacted prices. So we're in this situation of, should we report on it and just, get that hatred in our comments, or do we just flat out ignore it? And a lot of people are going in that direction, but for me, I'm not going to simply ignore it, because I feel like the best thing that I can do for you all is to inform you with the best of my ability. Now, I'm not trying to change your political affiliation, your opinions about things. You feel how you feel, and that's perfectly fine. So, with that in mind, last month, Nintendo infamously delayed their Switch 2 pre-orders to assess, quote-unquote, market conditions, which is, code for tariffs. However, after a period of time, a pause got announced for tariffs as ongoing negotiations take place with various different countries, including where Nintendo manufactures the Switch 2. And with that information, ultimately, Nintendo decided to keep the same prices for their Switch 2 and its games. However, accessories, on the other hand, that are being made in China specifically did unfortunately go up in price, because as a lot of us already know, the China situation has been, we're just going to say, volatile, to say the least. And then, much like Nintendo, similar to their accessories, Xbox makes their consoles over in China, which means, yeah, a price hike for Xbox consoles. Now, when they announced that price hike, I pushed back on some of that, because at least when it comes to games, game prices. I feel like them using market conditions for game prices going up to $80, to me, that's nothing more than a convenient excuse. What we know for a fact, and we've known this for a while, is that well before the tariff situation, there were already reports that game companies were looking for an excuse to increase their game prices to $80. And the reason for that is because AAA game budgets have ballooned out of control this generation. I mean, some of these games now cost well beyond $300 million to make, which is crazy to think about. And in my opinion, a lot of that kind of comes down to mismanagement for AAA games. You shouldn't have to sell 5+ million copies of a game for razor-thin profits. That just doesn't seem sustainable. Now, I've been saying that for years. But here we are, and, well, $80 games will more than likely become the new norm relatively soon. And they kind of got their convenient excuse with quote-unquote market conditions. Now, when it comes to their console prices, on the other hand, admittedly, that's a little bit of a different story. Obviously, if you manufacture your hardware or your products in China when it has a 145% tariff, yeah, that's going to impact the pricing. However, and I've said this a number of times, the tariff situation is still very fluid. It changes by the day because there's a lot of negotiations going on. And there was a recent breakthrough. China and the United States, for as heated as it's gotten, they've eased tensions with a 90-day pause for both sides. U.S. tariffs on China have now been reduced from 145% to 30%, and I've also seen reports of 10%. Then China tariffs on the U.S. have reduced from 125% to just 10%. So this is welcome news, which again, for better or worse, intertwines with the gaming world. So again, we kind of have to talk about it. Just 1 week ago, Microsoft jumped ahead to raise the price of their consoles, and Nintendo raised the price of their Switch 2 accessories. So now the question kind of becomes, with this news, will they suddenly, drop the price? Now, I'd like to tell you that will immediately happen, and I think that it eventually could. Now, I'm not so sure that it's going to happen as fast as they decided to increase them. We'll see what happens with all that. But I'll tell you this much right now. Those $80 games, they can use whatever kind of excuse that they want. But they're not coming down in price anytime soon. Market conditions for that was always a convenient excuse. And don't be surprised when more companies, more AAA game companies, follow suit. I think by the end of 2026, this $80 game conversation will be a very normal thing. Just like we saw earlier in the generation when game company after game company jumped to $70. First it was Sony, then it was Xbox, then it was Capcom. And, we just saw one company after another jump to that $70 price over the next 2 years. And I think we're going to see a very similar thing here when it comes to $80. Either way, hopefully this news at the very least will bring Xbox consoles back down to reasonable prices, and hopefully that comes sooner rather than later. And the same goes for the Switch 2 accessories that were impacted. Hopefully we do see those prices come back down. Let me know what you all think about all this, though, but just like I said yesterday, please, everybody, just be nice to each other. I get it. This can be a heated topic. Everybody has their own opinions. I'm not trying to sway anybody, but let's just be civil in the comments below. That's all I ask. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.